The coffee was already cold by the time Jack Sullivan noticed the tension 2 booths over. He hadn't planned to be at Patty's diner that Thursday evening. His 9-year-old daughter, Ruby, had begged for pancakes after her soccer practice. And Jack, who had been surviving on frozen meals and exhaustion since his wife passed 18 months ago, figured a short stack and scrambled eggs beat another silent dinner at home. He was cutting Ruby's pancakes into triangles the way she liked when he heard it. "I said, you're embarrassing yourself." The man's voice was low, controlled, the kind of low that's worse than shouting. "Sit down and stop making a scene." Jack looked up without turning his head. In the booth across the aisle, a woman in a cream blouse sat with her hands folded tight on the table, knuckles pale. Across from her sat a man in a navy suit, clean shave, expensive watch, the practiced smile of someone used to getting his way. Beside the woman, a younger woman, a sister maybe, sat frozen, eyes cast down at her untouched plate. The man in the suit leaned forward. "Everything you have, Charlotte, I gave you. Don't forget that." Jack felt the familiar pull in his chest. The instinct he'd carried since childhood, the one his late wife, Megan, used to call his broken radar for people who need help. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself he had a daughter watching him. He told himself he was just a 34-year-old high school shop teacher with grease under his fingernails and no business inserting himself into a stranger's dinner. Then Charlotte flinched. It was barely anything. A slight recoil, a tightening of her jaw. But Jack recognized it. He had seen that same expression on his mother's face 30 years ago, across a different table in a different diner in a town he'd spent his whole adult life trying to forget. He set down his fork. "Daddy." Ruby looked up at him. "1 second, baby." He stood, crossed the short distance, and stopped at the edge of their booth. The man in the suit looked up at him with the mild irritation of someone swatting at a fly. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested Jack had tracked mud across a clean floor. "I think that's enough." Jack kept his voice even. He wasn't a large man in the movie hero sense. Broad shoulders from years of hauling lumber, calloused hands, a quiet steadiness that people either respected or underestimated. "The lady looks like she'd like some space." The man's eyes narrowed. "This is a private conversation. Then have it somewhere private." Jack didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there the way a fence post stands in a storm. Not threatening, not moving. "Right now, she looks uncomfortable, so I'm going to stand here until that changes." A long silence stretched across the table. The younger woman, Olivia, looked up for the first time, eyes wide and grateful and scared all at once. Charlotte herself had gone very still, watching Jack with an expression he couldn't quite read. The man in the suit finally let out a short, contemptuous sound. He straightened his jacket, placed a folded $100 bill on the table with deliberate slowness, and stood. He was taller than Jack by 2 inches, and made sure Jack felt every one of them. "You have no idea," he said quietly, "what you just stepped into." "Probably not," Jack agreed, "but I know what it looked like from where I was sitting." The man walked out. The bell above the diner door chimed his exit like punctuation. Jack turned to Charlotte. Up close, she was younger than he'd initially thought. Early 30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that held the particular exhaustion of someone who had been strong for a very long time. "You okay?" he asked. She exhaled, slow, shaky, like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "I will be. Thank you." She paused. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He glanced back at Ruby, who was watching the whole thing with the wide, unblinking attention of a child filing away a memory. "My daughter's waiting. You two going to be all right?" Charlotte nodded. Olivia reached across and squeezed her hand. Jack went back to his booth. Ruby looked at him very seriously. "Was that man being mean to that lady?" she asked. "Yeah, baby, he was." "Good thing you said something." She picked up her fork and resumed eating her pancakes with the calm satisfaction of a child whose worldview had just been confirmed. "Mommy always said, you can't just watch." Jack looked at his cold coffee and smiled for the first time in longer than he could remember. He didn't think about it after that. That was the honest truth. Life as a single father had a way of filling every available space. Lesson plans, soccer schedules, grocery runs, the specific grief of tucking in a 9-year-old who sometimes cried for her mother in the night. There was no room left for wondering about strangers in diners. For days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of his house. Jack was in the driveway replacing a brake line on his truck. When the vehicle stopped, a driver in a gray uniform stepped out, polished shoes, quiet demeanor, and walked toward him holding a small envelope. "Mr. Sullivan." Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag. "That's me. I have a message for you." The driver handed him the envelope and returned to the SUV without another word. Inside was a card. Thick cream stock, the kind that costs more than most people's grocery bills. Handwritten in precise, careful letters. "Mr. Sullivan, you were kind when kindness cost you something. I would like like to repay that, if you'll allow me. No strings, no obligation. Below it, a phone number. Jack stood in his driveway for a long moment, holding the card, feeling slightly ridiculous. He almost threw it away. He almost convinced himself it was some kind of mistake or misunderstanding, some elaborate setup he couldn't see the edges of yet. Instead, he went inside and called the number. What Jack didn't know, what most people in Fairview, Ohio didn't know, was that Charlotte Bennett was the only daughter of Walter Bennett, who had built Bennett Holdings from a single manufacturing plant in 1987 into a privately held empire with holdings in 6 states. Walter had passed 2 years ago, leaving everything to Charlotte, who had spent the last 24 months quietly, methodically taking the company in a new direction, away from the extractive practices her father had normalized, towards something she actually believed in. The man in the diner, Victor Lang, had been her father's most trusted advisor, and for the past year had been pressuring Charlotte to sell the company's largest division to a private equity group he had undisclosed ties to. The dinner had been his latest attempt to convince her, or coerce her. The line, Charlotte had learned, was something Victor found flexible. She had been alone with it for months. Her legal team was cautious. Her board was divided. Olivia was loyal but not equipped for the business side of it. And Charlotte, for all her intelligence and resolve, had been running on empty. Something about a shop teacher standing up in a diner, no angle, no calculation, just a man who decided that watching wasn't enough, had cracked something open in her. She didn't offer Jack money. That wasn't what the card was about. And when they met for coffee the following morning at the same diner, she told him so directly. "I have enough resources to handle my situation," she said. "What I've been missing is perspective. You did something 4 days ago that reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" he asked. "That the right move is usually the obvious one. You just have to be willing to stand up." She paused, then asked about Ruby. She'd noticed her, she said, the little girl who had watched everything with those serious eyes. Jack told her about Megan. Charlotte listened the way few people listened, fully, without already forming her response. By the end of the coffee, nothing dramatic had happened. No deals, no grand gestures. Just two people who had accidentally found something they'd both been missing, the ordinary courage of being honest with another person. 3 months later, Victor Lang's attempted board manipulation collapsed under the weight of a forensic audit Charlotte had quietly commissioned. He resigned. The division stayed. Charlotte redirected a portion of the company's charitable arm toward vocational education programs in underfunded schools, the kind of shop and trade classes that were disappearing from districts like the one Jack taught in. Fairview High School received a grant that kept its shop program running for the next 5 years. Jack found out when his department head dropped a letter on his desk one Tuesday morning. He read it twice, then set it down slowly, thinking about a little girl who wanted pancakes, a cold cup of coffee, and the sound of a diner bell ringing as a coward walked out the door. That evening, he and Ruby made dinner together. Real dinner, nothing frozen, something with actual vegetables. He told her that sometimes doing the right thing in one small moment sends ripples further than you can see. Ruby considered this very seriously while stirring the pasta. "Like when you drop that penny in the fountain at Christmas," she said. Jack laughed, really laughed, the kind that fills a quiet house. "Yeah," he said, "exactly like that." Outside, the streetlights came on one by one down the block, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty at all. The end.